Today I'm going to show you how I made these armrest side tables for my couch. The first thing that I did was cut all my material to length. I went 14 inches, but it depends on how long you want your side tables to be. Anytime I'm making repetitive cuts at the same length, I set up either a stop block, or in this instance I'm using the end of my fence. This not only helps ensure that they're the same length, but also speeds up the process. The next thing I do is rip my material down to width for my sides. I then use an 1/8 inch roundover bit with a bearing guide to round over all my corners. And here you can see me ripping my tops down to width, as I forgot to do that earlier. I give a roundover on all edges on my sides, but I only give a roundover on the top portion of my tops. I then sand all my pieces, working my way up to 180 grit. Sanding is one of the parts of the job that I look forward to the least, but it's also one of the most important parts. You can really tell the difference between somebody that takes their time and somebody that just rushes through it. Once the sanding is complete, I begin assembly. I use glue and some brad nails, as this doesn't need to be a super strong joint. There's always something that goes wrong. Luckily, it really wasn't that big a deal. I just scraped the glue off and reapplied. Using pocket hole screws here would be another good option. I couldn't find my drill bit, so I opted to use brads. Glue and brads is plenty strong enough for this type of application, but if you did want to use pocket hole screws, it certainly would help strengthen it. Once it's nailed together, I just scrape off the excess glue. I always try to do this before it hardens up. When I need wood filler for a project, I try to use wood glue and leftover sawdust from sanding earlier. This helps give a pretty good match, although here it looks like it's a lot darker, but in the end it turned out really good. Once it was sanded and stained, you could hardly tell the difference. Another thing I like to do is sand it almost immediately after you apply it. This also will mix in some new sawdust with the wood filler itself. This helps to match the color of the wood even better. Now these cordless Milwaukee Sanders are great, but they do have one downfall. The cover for the dust collection and filter location is absolute trash. I've heard of some people using either elastics or tape to hold them shut, which is a temporary fix, but I really think Milwaukee should improve this on the next model. That being said, that's the only drawback that I've found with this, and it's great that it has variable speeds. Once I had all my flat surfaces sanded, I moved on to my corners. Now I just used some sandpaper and sanded it by hand, helping to ease over this transition and making a nice round corner. I then began the finishing process. The first thing I did was wipe off all the sawdust that was left over and then applied wood conditioner. I see too many people skip this step, and you can really tell. Wood conditioner helps allow the wood to absorb the stain in a more even fashion. If you skip this step, you can often tell by seeing splotches of stain, especially in softwoods such as pine. Allow the wood conditioner to soak in for 5 to 10 minutes and then wipe off any excess. Once the excess is wiped off, you can move right into staining. The stain should also be left for 5 to 15 minutes and then wipe off any excess. This too is often a step I see missed, especially by beginners. Wiping off the extra stain not only helps ensure an even coat, but also helps eliminate some rough spots. After the stain is dried for at least 8 hours, you can then clear coat. Here I'm using an oil modified, but still a water-based polyurethane clear finish. I make sure to start with my bottom of my piece, this way I can flip it over and finish on the top. Minwax recommends using a synthetic bristle, which is what I'm using here. Once I have my first coat on the underside, I use thumbtacks to hold my piece up off the other surface. This allows me to complete my first coat all at the same time. When you're applying this clear coat, you want to put it on in thin layers. If you don't, you're going to get tons of runs, and it's going to take you twice as long as it would have if you just did it right the first time. This finishing process would go a lot quicker if you had a sprayer, but unfortunately I do not. After 4 hours, I come back and give a light sand with 220 grit, just knocking off the high spots in the finish. Once you have it sanded, you want to make sure that you wipe off any of that dust before you reapply. When applying your second coat, you want to follow the same instructions as your first. And here I am again using that same thumbtack trick as I did in my first coat. When I'm doing the bottom side, I also do about halfway up on the sides. This allows for me to have a dry spot to grab to flip the project over. Another good practice is to start from the top down, same way you paint a house. This way, if you have any drips, you'll smooth them out when you get down to it. Also, using long, smooth strokes helps ensure a nice, smooth finish. I actually came back and applied a third coat, but didn't get it on camera. Once all that was dry, I came and removed the tacks and brought them inside to install. Here's the finished product. Thanks for tuning in and happy building.